This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. And today we're super excited to be joined by the Polish super lawyer, Nicole Czajkoski. Nicole, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
So for the listeners out there who are tuning in on the radio, Nicole is not here in person, and I think that it is because of her intimidation because she's a brunette appearing on Justice is Blonde. But as you know, we are equally happy to have people of all hair colors as guests on the show. So keep that in mind for the future, Nicole. Don't be afraid.
I got it.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about today on the show is we're gonna hear later in the show from Prosecutor Rob Freyr about his experience prosecuting a man who was charged with hitting a police officer with his truck on Christmas Day and the fallout from that and just the reactions from him. And we're also going to talk about the year in review as far as things that have happened in our community. He mentions Hurricane Harvey and just the impact of the community with Hurricane Harvey. So for the beginning part of the show, we're just going to kind of do a year in review of changes in the law and legislative things that occurred that may be interesting for the consumers of our show or folks that are members of our community to find out about. So first off, one of the things that we're really excited about this year is Conroe, Texas. Do you know, Nicole, what number it is as far as fastest growing cities in the country?
I'm going to guess number 7.
It's number 1. Number 1.
Oh, really?
Like the number 1 other Polish lawyer in Montgomery County, which is yourself. Conroe is number 1 as far as growth. So it's really good to be a defense lawyer in this town with those changes happening, where we have more folks coming out here and taking advantage of all our great resources. But some of the things that have happened in the law that may be helpful to people that have been in trouble before is, for example, you can now get a DWI non-disclosed from your record. And that didn't used to be the case. So that's exciting for some people who maybe made a bad decision when they were younger, that they now qualify to have that offense non-disclosed from their record after September 1st.
Andrea, will you tell them what the difference is between non-disclosure and expunction? Because I get that question all of the time for people who are looking at protecting their criminal records.
So an expunction is basically the best case scenario, because when you have an expunction, you can literally return yourself to the status of never being arrested, and you can answer honestly that you've never been arrested of a criminal offense. And it allows you to return to the status of, if you got arrested for something, charged, and your case was dismissed or you were found not guilty, you are allowed to act like that event never occurred, even though obviously in your lifetime, you as the person that was accused and went through this process, it occurred. But it allows you to basically have a clean record or start with a clean slate. Now with the non-disclosure, it's not as good, but it's still better than nothing. Because what happens with the non-disclosure is there's still about 51 agencies that have access to non-disclosed records. And for the most part, those agencies are prisons, people that deal with schools, old folks, things of that nature. So they're, securities regulations. So basically anything where you would have to have a secure background check, the FBI, DPS, all law enforcement agencies are generally going to still have access to those records. But, most people trying to get a job, let's say you're trying to get a job at Sherman-Williams, or you're trying to go work for a computer company, you will be able to not have to disclose the DWI on your record. So that's a real benefit to folks that have considered that a handicap in the past. And I think it's good because it gives folks a second chance if they do, in fact, have a mistake when they're young or even when they're older. So obviously the expunction's better. If you qualify for it, great. Do you know, and don't you usually have to wait out the statute of limitations on those, Nicole?
My understanding is that depending on the crime, the district attorney's office is taking the position that they, in some circumstances, will waive the waiting requirement. So I know in cases that I've had, they've agreed to it, and we haven't had to wait the time. But, the important thing I think about the DWI stuff is that there's a lot of people that could go out and get a great job with UPS or FedEx or something where traveling or driving, if they had to have a company car, that in the past a DWI would prevent them from getting that job. And now they still have the DWI conviction, but they are going to be able to apply and possibly get jobs that require driving or company cars. So I think it's a great change in the law. I think it's going to help a lot of people that we represent.
Well, and then the other thing is it gives us different strategies depending on the kind of case that somebody has. So if you get an interlock in your car for 6 months and you're on probation, then you actually qualify to have your offense non-disclosed after 2 years. If you don't have the interlock, you have to wait 5 years. So normally somebody might say, I don't want an interlock on my car. It's a machine and, I have kids. I don't want to go to carpool with this, but they may change their opinion if they know they can get that offense off their record sooner. What do you think?
I mean, I think it's definitely something that you want to consider is how quickly do you want to get this off of your record? It never can be a bad thing. And, I was sitting outside the courthouse the other day, and one of the local lawyers that has a great reputation was sitting there and he was speaking to his client, and I happened to overhear him. He was explaining, expungement and non-disclosure, and he was like, look, this is the only time in your life that you're ever going to be able to legally lie about the fact that you've been arrested. And I was like, that's a great way to put it. It's not every day that you get to legally lie and say, I didn't get arrested for this charge. And so I think employers are so worried about liability these days that any time that you can get things off your criminal record, no matter what the cost is, it's worth the money to try to do it.
So, of course, you want to have a good lawyer to assist you in making those decisions. And, if you do have a lawyer that can get your case dismissed or get you found not guilty, that's a better scenario than if you were to be convicted and then having to get it non-disclosed. So, and
absolutely.
And there are a couple other issues whereby, for example, you can't have a blood alcohol concentration of greater than a 0.15, and there can't be an accident. So they really want to give the folks a second chance who have, I guess, what I would consider non-offensive driving while intoxicated offenses. So
yeah, that's my understanding as well.
That's one of the driving changes. Now, additionally, it's now against the law, finally. It's been against a lot of people's better judgment for a long time to text and drive. So now that's against the law. You can get a citation for it. It can be probable cause to pull you over and investigate. And, it also is a situation where it's a Class A misdemeanor if you kill someone while texting and driving, which I think you and I both know in this district attorney's office in Montgomery County, they would certainly find something else to charge if that had occurred. Don't you think?
Yes, you're talking about charging a higher degree of offense. I mean, when I worked at the district attorney's office before they had the law where it was a Class A texting while driving if you kill someone, they would charge people with manslaughter and then try to prove that, or they would that you reckless by texting. And there's an argument to be made that in fact is true. There's an argument to be made that in fact is something that isn't necessarily reckless. So, but yes, I would think that if you get caught texting while driving in Montgomery County and you kill someone, that you should be prepared to face charges that are higher than a Class A.
Higher than the ones that are legislated. And certainly as a defense attorney, sometimes, you would argue in these driving-related fatality cases that sometimes accidents are just accidents and there doesn't necessarily have to be a criminal consequence. But, Nicole, we're going to take a break to hear from our sponsors. And after the break, we're going to talk a little bit about marijuana and cannabis regulation here in Texas and talk about a couple other changes in the law. You're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. It's no big deal. This is no big deal.
Remember to download the Lone Star Community Radio app from your Google Play Apple Store. Bring Montgomery County's community radio with you anywhere with your smartphone or tablet. If you are in the Conroe area, tune in on FM 104.5, 106.1. If you are on your computer, bookmark irlonestar.com as your internet radio station. Lone Star Community Radio broadcasting 24/7 from the heart of downtown Conroe, Texas. Super
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio. And if you're just joining us, we're joined by special guest, Polish super lawyer Nicole Czajkoski. Nicole, we're super happy to have you back.
I'm glad to be here.
And if you're also just joining us, what we were visiting about before the break was we're talking about some changes in the law in the state of Texas, also, which would also be in Montgomery County, that have occurred since 2017. And one of the changes in the law that we were visiting about before the break was texting and driving. And so basically, don't text and drive. Worst case scenario, you get a ticket. Sometimes it could result in probable cause, which could result in your vehicle being searched. And if your vehicle is searched and they find marijuana, Nicole, Texas, how do we feel about marijuana?
I mean, I think how do I feel, or how do we feel generally?
I would just say Texas, I feel, is kind of a holdout versus the rest of the country as far as marijuana.
Absolutely. But people ask me all the time, do you ever think that marijuana will be legal in Texas? And I actually do. I think that we are headed in that direction. It's just we're going to be at the very end of this train of let's legalize it.
We'll be the 50th state.
We will be the last holdout, probably. But I think they're folding quickly. So I think that there's a chance that we could see that in the next 10 years.
Well, this is what I think is a concern. So first of all, I know that in Harris County, they're not prosecuting the marijuana offenses as aggressively. In fact, I think there's a rule that if they don't have more than 4 ounces of marijuana, if there's no intent to deliver or distribute, that you basically get a ticket, the evidence is destroyed, you take a class, and the case is dismissed. So bad for us as defense attorneys, because then they're not going to hire us, but good for the folks that are pulled over. What do you think?
Yeah, and so for the listeners to know, 4 ounces of marijuana is a lot. And in Montgomery County, if you get caught with 4 ounces of marijuana and you don't have a good lawyer, you are facing up to a year in the county jail. So for it to be legal practically in Harris County, but you could be facing up to, a year in the county jail in Montgomery County, that's a huge discrepancy in how the law is being applied.
Well,
and so for attorneys, that's a concern.
And as far as our clients, if you get caught with 4 ounces, they call that a QP, or a quarter pound of marijuana. And that is a lot, especially if you're to physically look at it. That's something that you can't usually make a good argument that you didn't know it was there because of the volume that it would be in your vehicle. So one of the things that I thought would be a reason that Texas would remain a holdout was because of the fact that it is probable cause for officers to search your vehicle. And in these other states where it's not against the law, if an officer comes up upon a car and it smells like marijuana, I imagine they can't then search the entire car because it's not illegal for the marijuana to be possessed. And I think that the smell of marijuana is often a way that law enforcement officers get to more serious drug offenses. Isn't that your opinion?
Absolutely. I tell all my clients, I said, look, as a prosecutor, I never prosecuted a case where somebody was sitting on their couch, smoking marijuana, not committing any other offenses. I never prosecuted that case because that doesn't exist. But when you get into your car and you're traveling with it and you're smoking it in your car, every time you get pulled over, a cop is going to use that to get into your vehicle. So, legally they have the right to do that. And so I just tell my clients, look, that is something that if you're going to do, it's, you need to be not driving around with marijuana in your car.
Do it in your living room. Move to states where it's legal. Change your life plan. Those are advice. Those are good advice.
Move to Oregon and open up a marijuana farm if that's what suits you. But you can't do it here in Montgomery County.
Or move south of Rayford Sawdust and don't drive north of Rayford Sawdust and don't travel with too much of it, and you may find yourself in better shape. But what's interesting, I think, though, is that even though you think that marijuana will ultimately, make that move, we do have a new law that is basically criminalizing marijuana wax and other types of marijuana where that's a felony. So in that other vein, it seems like Texas is moving away from that direction. Isn't that your experience?
Absolutely. The fact that I don't know, some of the people, the listeners may know this, but, when you talk about the wax, they also have forms of marijuana now, or I've actually defended cases where my clients have had gummy bears that have some type of marijuana substance in them, and that is a felony, where it's, in the client's view, it's like, well, it's marijuana. Why am I being charged with a felony when I have no criminal history? But legally, that is what our lawmakers have done. They've turned in, if you have a gummy bear that's marijuana, that's a felony. But if you have regular marijuana, depending on the amount, that can be a misdemeanor. So it is scary for people who partake in marijuana that don't know. Look, if you start taking gummy bears or any kind of wax or anything like that, you're in a totally different field than you are, or of liability than you are if you just smoke marijuana.
So, Nicole, we are coming to the end of this segment, and just so the viewers can get to know you a little bit better and to keep you on your toes, we're going to hit you with the Justice's Blonde lightning round.
All right.
You will be asked a series of questions, and you got to answer as quickly as possible. It's called the lightning round. It's not called the turtle round. So, you ready?
What do I get if I win?
You get to be on again.
Okay.
So
let's do it.
Okay. Prosecutor or defense attorney?
Are you asking me what I am?
No, you got to just pick one. It's the lightning round.
Defense attorney.
Georgia or Alabama?
Georgia.
Snack at the gas station. Beef jerky or anything else?
Anything else.
Christmas Eve or Christmas Day?
Christmas Day.
Santa Claus or Kris Kringle?
Santa Claus.
Country music or any other kind of music?
Any other kind of music.
Ted Cruz or other favorite politician in Texas?
I take the fifth.
Team roper or bull rider?
Bull rider.
Complete the following sentence. Justice is
blonde.
We appreciate
sometimes.
Sometimes it's brunette.
Sometimes, unless I'm representing you, and then it's a little bit of dyed brunette.
We're coming to the close of our segment. We really appreciate having you on, Nicole. We hope to have you back. We do plan to hear from a prosecutor, so I'm sure he'll choose prosecutor versus defense attorney. He'll choose the prosecutor. In the next segment, Rob Freyr, recurring guest, also known as Agg Rob. You're listening to Justice is Blonde, and we're available at irlonestar.com/justicesblonde. We're available worldwide and on the Lone Star Internet Radio app. You can see us Wednesdays at 2 p.m. And if you have any burning questions for the Blonde, contact me at Andrea@nonstopjustice.com.
Don't miss Lone Star Community Radio on TV and YouTube. Our talk show and music shows are featured on Our City TV, Suddenlink Channel 12, and have their own YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe to keep up with posted shows and comment on them below the video.
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Internet Radio. And today we're joined by a very special guest, recurring guest, the lovely and talented Rob Freyr, Assistant District Attorney, also known as Agg Rob,
Good afternoon.
to defendants across Montgomery County. Good afternoon. How you doing,
Good afternoon.
Rob?
I'm doing fine. How are you?
So we're really excited to be back on air. It's been a while, but now we have our FM channel is rocking and rolling. It's been a while. It's FM 104.5 and 106.1. We're also, Dick, what's our TV channel?
So you can watch Andrea 3 different ways. It will be on YouTube. Just look up Justice is Blonde and subscribe to that channel to get the YouTube version, which is on demand. And then locally in Conroe, it'll be channel 12 if you have Suddenlink as a provider. And then if you have an antenna in the area, just look up Channel 21, and you can find her on there.
So if you don't have Channel 12, then apologies that you can't see the lovely Rob Freyer and how blonde I am these days. But we are back in the studio, and today we want to talk a little bit about not only this trial that Rob has had in his recent history, but we want to kind of talk about the year in review and what's happened in the law, not only in 2017, but just kind of the climate and the country. So wrapping up 2017, the way we'd like to bring it in is if you come in with Rob, you leave with Rob, that's a good year. So we're really happy to have you, Rob. So we want to talk a little bit about this officer aggravated assault, attempted capital murder scenario.
Aggravated assault of a public servant for Officer Michael Chapman, Conroe Police Department.
And we got to hear from Vinny last week. He was really excited about being a part of this trial team, and he had a lot of fun little stories that he was able to tell us about the trial preparation and things that y'all did. But one of the things that I said to Vinny is that being an observer of this trial, it really made you feel like whether you were on the defense side or on the prosecution side, that the American flag was waving in the background the entire trial.
It was. I mean, this officer, was a rookie at the time back in 2015. It was Christmas night, and he answered an alarm call at a business called West End Roofing right there at 1488 and 45. Little did he know that there were two trucks that had gone onto the property, and they were stealing roofing shingles. And the first truck drove right at the officer. He was able to get out of the way, but in the process of trying to get back into his patrol car to follow the first car, this defendant was driving a pickup truck that struck the officer's door and pinned his left leg between his driver's door and the frame of his car. And it broke his leg, it broke his tibia and his fibula. It was very, very painful. And it could have been a lot worse.
And so ultimately, what happened to the individual that you tried for this injury to Officer Michael Chapman?
Well, we went to trial starting on December the 4th, and we were able to, basically gather a framework of evidence that we had. I mean, we had DPS come in and do an outstanding job at comparing the broken glass that was ultimately found in the defendant's truck.
And also in the living room of the courtroom.
Yes, we brought in the actual doors to the side of Officer Chapman's car, so it was a very, very powerful evidence, and the jury was very interested, and they poured through a lot of good evidence. We had a defendant who, like so many other defendants, gets himself in trouble by not keeping his mouth shut. I like
to say to my clients, a fish never got caught that didn't open his mouth.
That is correct.
And you've had a little bit of trouble fishing lately, right?
I haven't been fishing because of this trial. Vince and I worked very hard in the weeks leading up to it, and we were in trial until Friday evening around 7:00 when the jury finally reached their verdict. We commend their hard work.
And what was the sentence?
40 years, TDC.
And so, as far as somebody getting 40 years, this was a young kid, right?
He was young. He was young.
Barely an adult.
He
18 at the time of the offense.
He was 18 when it happened.
Eligible for probation.
He was probation eligible, yes.
Now, did the defense argue that probation was an appropriate punishment?
The defense in punishment really didn't have much to work with because nobody from the defendant's family came to testify on his behalf. None of his friends were there. We don't know where they were. I mean, he doesn't have a burden to put on any evidence, but we put on evidence that he was a documented member of MS-13 and that he had done this sort of theft at least 4 other times in addition to this case.
Now, were those times as a juvenile or those times all as a 18-year-old?
He was 18 when he did them all.
Okay.
They were in the same time frame as this.
And so just for the folks in the audience that don't know what MS-13 is, gang.
MS-13 is a gang called Mara Salvatrucha that originated, I believe, in Honduras and El Salvador, and they have come into the United States and are very prevalent in larger cities: Baltimore, Charlotte, North Carolina, Atlanta, and they have a presence.
Atlanta.
They have a presence in Houston as well as L.A., New York, and they have some very dangerous individuals, very violent individuals.
And so in order to put on testimony that somebody belongs to a gang, how do you establish that? Is it by tattoos? Is it by experts? Or how do you establish that someone's
We
actually
proved
in
it
a
up
gang?
in this case because we had documentation that showed that he had admitted in the past to being a member, and we had an expert from Conroe PD, an officer, a sergeant named Juan Salceda, who testified from a photograph that we had of the defendant that it was consistent with the gang signs that are employed and used, flashed by members of that gang.
And so, this is actually a TV version. So if you can demonstrate the sign, just so the folks
I don't
know what
remember.
that is.
I don't remember which one it was. It was something like this, where there's so many different signs and
Maybe something like this.
something like this. I wasn't sure exactly.
Okay. But something that implies there's a 1 and a 3.
There are unique signs that these gang members use on the street. They aren't very proud about using them in a courtroom because a courtroom is the worst place to ever admit that you're a member of a street gang in front of a jury of the citizens of Montgomery County.
So what's difficult in this case as a defense attorney is that if your defensive strategy the entire trial is it wasn't me, you got the wrong guy, and then the jury says, well, sorry, the overwhelming evidence is that it looks like it was you, it's hard as a defense attorney to put on evidence about, I guess from a punishment standpoint, I know you got me. Basically you have to stick with this is a terrible tragedy. You got the wrong guy.
Well, a crucial piece of evidence that Vince and I put on, and that Vince very ably, very competently argued to come in, was that we put on evidence that Shenandoah PD, an officer from Shenandoah, had stopped the same defendant in the same truck doing the same thing he was doing on the night of December 26, 2015, 2 months earlier. So we knew
Stealing
we
roofing
had
shingles.
Stealing roofing shingles. And we knew we had the right truck. Conroe PD, due to their hard work, their detectives and an officer named Jesse Minshew, they were able to locate the truck which had been damaged by this collision. This was in no way an accident. This could have been avoided, unlike what you would think of when you have an accident. So they find the truck the next day across the freeway. And it was from that they went to Burlington, the detectives, and located 2 individuals. So there were 4 individuals that happened to be in the store at the same exact time asking about the truck. So they started to be able to put names to that vehicle, which was covered in roofing shingles and had sustained damage to the front of it to the point to where it was not drivable.
So damage consistent with striking a patrol car.
Yes, we had paint chips from Officer Chapman's patrol car mixed in with the front quarter panel of this defendant's pickup truck.
And they had the misfortune of being sort of not high on the intelligence list of going in and providing names when they start asking questions about a vehicle at a location where law enforcement is already located.
Had they not gone back to Burlington to try to locate this truck, they might have gotten away with it. But, these officers worked so hard. This was at Christmas time. These officers...
It was about 2 years ago.
It was almost 2 years ago to the date. It was Christmas night 2015. And it was a night out there where Officer Chapman was out there. It was cold. It was raining. And he put himself in grave danger just to, do the things that we take for granted on a daily basis.
And that was one of the things that I had mentioned, earlier in the segment, this past week when I had the show with Vinny, also known as the Great Santini. His name is it seems a little more promotional than Agg Rob. Are you gonna? So first of all, we'll get back to that, where you're gonna have to come up with a nickname commensurate with the Great Santini.
Vince is a very, very talented, very, very confident on his feet trial attorney. He is very good. We were very prepared. It was a real pleasure to get to try this case with Vince. I think the second case, we tried a drug case a few years ago where we had a really good result. But he's just very good. He's very organized. He has a good sense of humor about himself. He doesn't take himself too seriously. But however, when it comes time to get the job done. I can't think of anybody that I would want on my side more than I would want Vince Santini.
Well, one of the things I watched your closing argument, and it was what I talked about when you're waving the American flag, is that, and I had said, Rob gets real fired up, but I mean that in a good way, is that, you stood in front of that jury and you said that the climate of this country has become anti-law enforcement, and you said it's just disgusting, the kind of where we are as far as people and how law enforcement is viewed, and you said it passionately, and it really is something that I have noticed as far as when we started doing Justice is Blonde several years ago. We started talking about Ferguson, and it has just spiraled as to kind of this anti-law enforcement sentiment where people are quick to disbelieve a police officer or think the worst.
Well, I'll limit it to the fine officers that work here in Conroe and Montgomery County without getting onto a national observation. But these officers work hard. They don't get paid enough. A lot of people, unfortunately, don't appreciate all the great things that they do. These are the officers that these people that say some things like that, but however, if something happens to them, they call the police, and the police always show up, and they're professional. They work hard. They care about their jobs. Officer Chapman, as well as his other officers, they were very dedicated in all respects. The detectives, the patrol officers, the officers, Ralph Horn and Stoney Cook, that processed these vehicles for days. And they were determined to ensure that a jury was able to hear the mountains of evidence that Vince and I presented in this case on behalf of all of these officers. So it was a real privilege. We try to express our gratitude at the DA's office on a daily basis for these hardworking officers. And our investigator, who is a police officer, AP Marilat, did an outstanding job at keeping tabs of witnesses, because this case had been set for trial like 4 or 5 times prior to us finally getting to go to court.
Now, let me ask you this. Was it trial strategy to try to go to trial at a time that was, the holidays, where it was, from a observer perspective, it really puts people in the same frame of mind as what was happening at that time?
As the timing played out, that turned out to work out. However, we were set for trial back in September, and we were ready back in September. And I wanted to get this case tried. It's been 2 years, and we fought, myself and another prosecutor who was working with me before Vince came on. We opposed the defense's motion for a continuance because we wanted to get this case tried.
And ultimately, as a defense attorney, sometimes things come up where you can't be ready, and you have to put your client's interest over convenience or efficiency of the court. And so it looks like everybody got their day in court, and unfortunately for the defendant, it didn't work out as I'm sure he had hoped. But we do need to take a break to hear from our sponsors. You're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio.
A Lone Star Community Radio is ready for the summer. If you or anyone you know is looking for summer internship opportunities, a Lone Star Community Radio is a great place to grab the mic and be on the air. A Lone Star Community Radio offers a great opportunity to those interested in learning about the radio world all year round. Be an on-air personality, talk show producer, or YouTube, TV, podcast editor. Contact the station at info@irlonestar.com or call the station's message line at 936-647-3776.
This is Andrea Kolski, and you're listening to Justice is Blonde on Lone Star Community Radio, and you're joined here with our end of the year show, and we're trying to finish strong, so we're bringing one of the strongest prosecutors, if not the strongest prosecutor in Montgomery County, Texas, Rob Freyr, aka Agg Rob, and not based on his temperament, because he's not angry all the time. Yeah, it's based on his passion for prosecuting aggravated robberies. If you rob a jewelry store in Montgomery County or try to carjack somebody or you're involved in any robbing behavior, you may find this person on the other side of your case, and then you may never get out of jail. Is that fair to say?
I've tried a few aggravated robberies in my day, but we've got other prosecutors that are just as able and good in a courtroom and I appreciate the compliments, but we all work hard down here. And, I'm going on 20 years doing the greatest job in the world.
Well, a couple of things that have happened this year that we can't get through the year without mentioning is Hurricane Harvey. Who would have expected the devastation across the state of Texas in both Montgomery County and Harris County, which is our city neighbor? Who would have expected that level of devastation based on even the reports?
It was all over the place. I mean, Jefferson County got it. All of southeast Texas was affected. I mean, and then you have the people down in Port Aransas and Port Lavaca that, I mean, our hearts go out to those people because the storm made landfall at Port Aransas and it destroyed a very beautiful part of the state. And my hats off to all the first responders down there who, ran towards the storm and not away from it to ensure that property and life was protected.
Well, and that's something that we had addressed on a previous show is that, it does seem like there is in some portions of the country an anti-law enforcement mentality. But I think that the storm just shows what law enforcement is capable of and really how they stuck together and did so much for our community as well as the great state of Texas.
Andrea, it's sad that an event like this happens, and you wouldn't want to wish this on anybody. But what this event underscored was that it took something like this to bring out the good in so many people: EMTs, doctors, nurses, volunteers. The folks from Louisiana that came over on their own dime
and got boats and we're trying to help folks out.
Yes, and it brought out the good in a lot of people. A lot of people down in Houston suffered. I mean, the Harris County Criminal Justice Center flooded for the second time in 15 years.
And you and I were both prosecutors there when it flooded the first time.
It was horrible.
It took months for us to get back into that building.
It was hard, and it's going to be worse this time.
And it's supposed to be worse this time. It may be a year or longer before you can get back into that facility.
It's bad.
And what was crazy about that building that you and I would go to work at for so many years and work on the same floors is that people were working intake, taking charges, and they're having to, they're getting flooded out and getting rescued from a building that, is responsible for accepting charges.
The people that worked intake that Friday night when the storm hit were there for 6 days, sleeping on couches, rotating. They had to be physically evacuated out of the building as the water was coming up. The doors that they had installed, the locks to keep the water out, did not work. The water came up over those things, and the entire first floor of the building once again
flooded again. And so you just wonder how that building is flooded, and then right around the corner, literally a quarter of a block away, civil building is fine.
The civil building was made it through the storm, to my knowledge. And now the criminal courts in Harris County have had to relocate over to the civil courthouse.
But a little inconvenience for defense lawyers and prosecutors. That's not something that we're trying to focus on. It's just the places that we do our job directly were directly impacted, and
yes.
Not only did people lose their things, some people lost their lives. Some people, lots of people lost their vehicles.
Yes, the damage to property was
exponential.
It was awful, and we just got back from lunch today at the Country Catfish on 105, and that's an example of a business that flooded. They had 4 to 5 feet of water in their house, and they got right back to work. And here we are 3 months later, and they are back up and running. And the food is still very good, by the way.
And that's Country Catfish on
Country
105.
Catfish, Vernon's Country Catfish on 105.
Now, additionally, I do think previously in the segment we talked about how during your trial I felt very pro-America and I felt like waving the American flag, but this definitely showed Texas pride, how Texas, I think, really came together as a state and really came together to support Houston and all the surrounding counties. And then, of course, one of your favorite athletes, really,
J.J. Watt.
really,
He did a very good thing for this community. He took it upon himself. Nobody asked him to do that. He didn't do it for his own self-promotion. He did it out of the goodness of his heart. And he obviously, with his ability to raise that amount of money, that just shows how much respect he commands from people in this community.
well, and ultimately, what just was so amazing is that he started out with a goal of $200,000.
Okay, I don't remember what it was, but I know that it wasn't $37 million.
And that's where it ended up. And eventually he had to cut off his funding and say, okay, the page is closed. I mean, so there's no telling where we would be at right now, but he did so much for the community and and made sure that the community knew this money is going directly to the folks that are affected. It's not going to administrative folks. Resources are going to be allocated as needed. And people were excited to help out that weren't in Texas.
They were. And, hats off to the guy. God bless him.
So as far as now, we talk about the good things and how the country came together and how Texas came together, but let's talk about the folks that used it as an opportunity.
Okay.
So
The
storm used it as an opportunity to commit crimes or criminal offenses.
Okay, so, I remember when I was a prosecutor down in Harris County years ago, back in 2005, we had Hurricane Rita. And during
Not Hurricane Margarita.
No, Hurricane Rita made landfall at the Beaumont area. However, we had a tremendous amount of looting, mostly burglary of building cases.
Like gas stations and convenience stores.
Convenience stores, Targets, Walmarts, whatever, anything where there were movable goods, and it was bad. I mean, we did not see during Harvey nearly the scope and extent of the looting, people taking advantage of a disaster to go out and when you think of going out and breaking into a business that's closed and taking all their beer or their TVs or taking whatever they could get their hands on. We really didn't see that much of that here in Montgomery County. I think, juries in this county have put people on notice that if somebody commits a crime in Montgomery County and we can prove it, we meet our burden of proof, then whatever happens. The juries are known. They deliver very, very
tough sentences,
strict sentences, strict verdicts.
Now, isn't it true too that when you have an offense that is committed during a natural disaster or during this situation where you can actually enhance somebody's punishment?
If you have a government declared natural disaster, any grade of offense, like say you have a state jail theft,
that's like the lowest grade of felony theft.
Fourth degree theft. Yeah. We can have basically an enhancement paragraph in the charging instrument, and assuming that we can prove that the offense was committed during a time where there was a government-mandated disaster proclamation, then the range of punishment goes up one level. So it takes a state jail felony breaking into a gas station or a Valero during a hurricane up to a third-degree felony.
And so basically what the public can know that means is in your scenario, like normally the most you could get would be 2 years, and in this scenario the most you can get is 10 years because
assuming they don't have any other enhancements or any prior criminal history. But you have the worst case scenario for a criminal who has been to the pen or has been to prison twice before and commits this sort of offense. He's looking at 25 to life. So obviously, we have very tough habitual offender laws in the state of Texas as well.
Well, so wrapping up Harvey and wrapping up the end of the year, we do want to know, folks, hey, what can I expect going to my holiday party? Besides, they'll hope to run into you, Rob, of course, because you're festive and fun to hang around with.
Well, I mean,
am I going to get pulled over? Are the DWI checkpoints? Is it mandatory blood draws these days? So tell us if folks are going to drink, what should they do?
Our office will be running, which we do pretty much every holiday, no refusal times where Christmas Eve, Christmas night, times where New Year's Eve, when there's heavy vehicle traffic. If somebody commits a traffic offense or gets involved in a wreck, and then it turns out that they are intoxicated, and they refuse the field test, or they refuse a breathalyzer, an intoxilizer test, then we will make a determination if we have probable cause to have a judge sign off on a search warrant to obtain that person's blood, whether they consent or not. If we have a warrant, we'll have a staff at the jail working, and a nurse, a judge. I'm sure there will be a judge there, and 2 or 3 prosecutors working around the clock during these times. But just in general, it's the standard thing that people hear every year, and that is take a cab. It's that simple. Take a cab. Have a designated driver. Take an Uber or a Lyft or the new services that are out there. It's just not worth it. It's not worth it to yourself, but it certainly is not worth it to an innocent person minding their own business, or a family. And you hear the tragic stories that stem from drinking and driving around the holidays. It's just, it's terrible. Shelter in place. Have people over to your house, and there's no reason to be out on the roadways on Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve.
Unless especially New Year's Eve, I would say that is traditionally a heavy drinking holiday where folks need to not necessarily rely on transportation and say, I'll just call an Uber at the end of the night, because other folk, that they may not be able to get an Uber. So
good luck getting an Uber at the front of the Woodlands on
New Year's Eve. So you may be best to plan your transportation in advance if you're planning to drink in excess.
Stay at the Marriott.
Stay at your house. Should we tell them where it is?
It's in Montgomery County.
So, but at the same time, it's interesting. We talked about this on a prior show. Previously, with the DWI, when you got pulled over on a DWI, they may not be able to get your blood, or there may not be a video, but just kind of the way that things have evolved, there's going to be a video of every DWI stop. And just about in every case now, at least in Montgomery County, it's not no refusal Friday. Every day is no refusal day. And they're going to get your blood if they have probable cause that you are intoxicated.
Andrea, gone are the days 15 years ago where when we screened misdemeanor cases, we would write NT or NTNA, which meant no test, no accident. We would try those cases with nothing but an officer's observations, basically.
Right, and no video of the scene.
And sometimes we would have video. Sometimes the only video we would have was when the person would be arrested, and they would take them back to the police department, back to HPD or to the sheriff's department. And they would do field tests in a room, not on the street, not right there.
It was not even as cozy as this room. It was like it was a smaller concrete.
It was a room that had a painted white line on it in a little box.
Right.
And that's all that we had. We didn't have anything else. The only other piece of tangible evidence we may have on a case like that is a defendant's booking photo, and that's it. So, but those days are long gone, and we have a staff, a division. Our vehicular crimes division is comprised of some of the best talented trial attorneys and vehicle-related case attorneys in the great state of Texas, in the country. I would compare the Tyler Dunmans of the world and Andrew Jameses, Adam McClain. They're the best. They are the best, and they have dedicated a substantial portion of their career to specialize in cases involving intoxicated and impaired drivers.
Well, and the thing as a defense attorney that I would give as advice to someone, and you may not agree with this advice, is that if you know you're going to fail the tests, don't do the tests. And also that includes the horizontal gaze nystagmus test. So in that case, if they're going to have to get a warrant for your blood anyway, make it harder to get the warrant. Give them as little information as possible to form their defense, and don't try to do the test and give them even more evidence.
Well, the best advice would be to tell your potential clients just not to drive at all, not to even be put in that position.
Well, then they wouldn't be my potential clients. They're only my potential clients, or they're only my clients after they make the decisions.
That is true. but I'm sure you have repeat clients that come back
because of repeated bad decisions
that may have not learned their lesson the first time. But the best advice is just if you drink, just don't get behind the wheel.
Don't drive.
Don't be with anybody else behind the wheel. It's just not worth it. Tipsy tow or those are services where a wrecker can come and get your car and tow your car back to your house will cost exponentially much less than what the cost would be to be arrested and charged with DWI.
Well, additionally, if you're going to a holiday party now in this wave of everything's recorded and everything ends up on social media. So if you're planning to act bad, assume that may be something that someone can record and later use as evidence, even in a criminal
We
situation.
see a lot of cases now that have, back when we were younger prosecutors, there were no iPhones. So, everything is on video now. So if somebody is leaving a bar or a party and a concerned citizen follows them and sees them not being able to stay in their lane or running a red light or whatever it is, that could be recorded. And then what they will do is that if that person calls 911, they will do an ATL, which is an attempt to locate. So now officers are now looking for that particular car a particular place.
And now what you have in certain situations is if you see somebody leaving a public place and you're concerned, now you have a video that they can play at trial.
You can. That's happened in a lot of cases where we've had videotapes of defendants that are doing large prison terms. We've had videos of these defendants in the bar taking shot after shot after shot on video.
Well, and then you also have folks that post things that they do on Facebook, and they think, Facebook is not something that the state of Texas is going to have access to. Well, the state of Texas knows how to use Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat.
Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, all of the social media sites are a wealth of information for investigators and prosecutors. And some of the things that we've seen defendants put on Facebook, large amounts of money, jewelry,
exactly. So
drugs.
You'll have felons that have been previously convicted of a felony, and they'll post themselves posing with a firearm.
Yes.
So we do need to say Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
And we do need to advise the folks of Montgomery County and other surrounding counties that are listening. You know what? If you're going to do something stupid as a defense attorney, I would say stay off the grid. Don't post it on social media. And also just stay sober. It'll make this holiday better for not just your family, but for everybody on the roads.
I mean, Montgomery County has become it's always been a great place, but in the almost the 10 years that I've been here, it's become a destination. There's no need to have to go.
Number one growing city in the country.
There's no
Conroe, Texas.
It is, and there's no need to have to go all the way to Houston to for entertainment. We have
you. We have the producer Dick Schisler.
We have a number of fine restaurants here in downtown Conroe, and with music and entertainment and food and everything else. And we have the Woodlands. We have everything. We have a new community going up here off of the Loop and 45. So it's just a bustling, great place.
It's a good place to be.
It is a great place to be.
So Merry Christmas to everybody that's listening, or whatever your holiday of choice. And we'll see you in 2018.
Merry Christmas to everybody. Happy New Year.
Chanel this, Chanel that, hell yeah, all my girls vintage Chanel, baby. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. It's no big deal. This is no big deal.
Thank you for checking out this production of Lone Star Community Radio. Lone Star Community Radio is Montgomery County's community radio station. Don't forget to check out this show and many others across the Lone Star Community Radio Network, either live on Conroe's FM 104.5, 106.1, the Lone Star Internet Radio app, or irlonestar.com's live audio stream, and on replay on podcast, Channel 12's Our City TV in Conroe, or Channel 21 KVQT in Houston, and of course their YouTube channel. This production is copyrighted and all rights are reserved by Lone Star Community Radio. Have a question regarding this program or other Lone Star Community Radio shows? Want to sponsor or start your own show? Call the station message line at 936-647-3643 3776 or email the station at lscrstudios@gmail.com.